Well, good morning to you all and welcome to the webinar. My name is Erik Famaey. I'm from the Belgian Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and we are very glad that we can host this event in cooperation with Flanders Investment and Trade. Now, before we start, some practical matters. The webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on the website of the organizers. You can put your questions in the chat box, and we shall put as many questions as possible to our speakers at the end of the webinar, not after each individual presentation. If your question is already in the chat box, just add a like mark so that we can pick it up as a priority. As to the program, we shall start today with a 5-minute introduction by Sarah Landuit. Sarah is the Manager Investment Promotion at the Development Authority of the Province of Antwerp, known to all of us as POM Antwerpen. Following Sarah, we will have 2 presentations presented to us by China experts that have been seconded to us by the EU SME Center. First, we will have Robert Goris, who will introduce the center and present some practical steps for companies on how to take on China. Robert has worked for 12 years in China, both for a private company and for the Benelux Chamber of Commerce. Next will be Johnny Browijs, and Johnny is a resident in Shanghai, having lived in China for 20 years. I would therefore qualify him as a Flemish expert with Chinese characteristics. And who better than Johnny to talk about the challenges for Western companies in China? And if those challenges seem daunting, think of the support that is available from the EU SME Center, from POM Antwerpen, from the Belgian Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and most accessibly for Flemish companies, of course, Flanders Investment and Trade. Michelle Surings, she's the Director for Trade with East Asia, will outline how FIT can support you. Following the presentation from FIT, we shall have a 20-minute Q&A. And finally, on my side, allow me a few words about our chamber. We are a strategic partner of Flanders Investment and Trade, but as the Belgian National Chamber, we are positioned as the contact of choice when Chinese officials and private companies look at Belgium. Most of our activities are open also to non-members, but membership will obviously give you the best possible access to what we have to offer. And that includes seminars and webinars now. And I know digital events and webinars can be boring and tiresome, but they are a fantastic medium to reach a faraway audience. Last week, the Chamber did a B2B webinar where we gave 10 high-tech companies, happened to be all from Flanders area. We gave them the chance to present themselves to a Beijing-based technology hub. It was fascinating to see how lively the interaction was, and it reminded me that even if the latest Chinese economic plan emphasizes Chinese technological independence and indigenous innovation, there is still great opportunity for intense cooperation between Chinese and foreign companies. So keep these 2 things in mind and go for it. And with this message, I would like to pass on the screen to Sarah.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Erik. I will now start sharing my screen. It should show up in a second. Normally, now everyone should be able to see the presentation. So I will start with indeed a very brief introduction on Cleantech Route China. If there would be any trouble viewing the presentation, please give me a sign. Cleantech Route China is a cooperation between the 5 Flemish provinces, several provincial development authorities or POMs, Cleantech Flanders and Flanders Investment and Trade. Given this partnership, of course, the support and activities are aimed at Flemish companies. Let's see, there's an issue with my presentation. All right. Yeah. Cleantech Route China is the continuation of the I2PCC project that ran from 2018 until 2020. It was a European funded project, and it gave us the opportunity to set up a new and joint activity program, which will now be continued and fine-tuned over the coming years. The support and activities we offer through Cleantech Route China are focused on informing, promoting, and connecting, as you can see on the slides. Our focus in China is on the sister cities and provinces of the Flemish provinces and the areas covered by the FIT offices, which you can all see on the map. Through long-time cooperation, we have developed strong relations and extensive networks with local governments, companies, knowledge institutions, and so on. How we can serve you? Well, we inform Flemish cleantech companies on different aspects of the Chinese market in order to prepare for actual business exchange. We offer a hands-on approach, and we are also open for individual questions. It's quite similar to the setup of this series of webinars, actually. More information can be found on our website, which is visible on the slides. On the website, you can find information, advice, case studies, relevant events, and of course, you can also register for our newsletter. You can also request our brochure, which is also visible on the slide. However, the website and brochure are, of course, also both in Dutch only available. An overview of the upcoming webinars within this series. As you can see, after today, we still have 5 more webinars with several different topics. Some webinars are more general, some webinars will be more aimed at tech or clean tech companies. Of course, don't forget to register for each webinar you wish to attend. You can register through either the website of Cleantech Route China, or you can register directly on the website of Flanders Investment and Trade. Some upcoming activities by Cleantech Route China. We have an online mission to Chongqing and Chengdu in cooperation with Flanders Investment and Trade. Registrations are currently open and are open until May 7th, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, the activities mentioned on this slide are again for Flemish companies. The mission is multi-sectoral, so it's not only open for clean tech companies. The expos that are mentioned on the slides, such as the CPEC Beijing and the IE Expo, are focused on clean tech, so are of course aimed at those companies. More future events will be mentioned on our website in the coming months, of course. Over the past years, we have put together a catalog of Flemish cleantech companies. We will make an update before the expos that will be attended during the summer in Beijing and Guangzhou. But we also use the catalog to promote Flemish cleantech companies through our network of representatives and during other events, meetings, and encounters with Chinese companies and governments. as we are making an update, and if you are interested to present your company through this catalog, you can contact myself and I will inform you on the details for the update. Of course, this is really focused on companies with clean tech activities, but don't hesitate to contact me if you would like to be represented in the catalog. Well, that's it for my part. Thank you all for your attention. I wish you all a very interesting webinar, and I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Robert Corris.
Thank you very much. I'll directly try to share my screen. I hear that there's an echo. Yeah, perfect. So thank you very much for the introduction and the information on Cleantech Route China. Today I will talk with Johnny on doing business in China, a checklist and support for companies, cleantech companies, or any companies that want to go to China. I'm first gonna explain a little bit about the EU SME Center that we represent today. So the EU SME Center was a project funded by the European Commission in 2010. It's already the third phase of the EU SME Center, and the key of the EU SME Center is to get SMEs ready for doing business in China. The EU SME Center is part of the EEN network and has partners over 270 government agencies in Europe, located in Beijing. But because they have such a wide partner network, they're able to reach far into Europe and advise and inform European SMEs as doing business in China. And it's a cooperation between 5 different organizations: the Italian Chamber, the China-Britain Business Council, the Danish Chamber, Eurochambre, and the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. So if we specify on the services the EU SME Center does, is they have a knowledge center, an advice center, a training center, and an advocacy platform. The knowledge center is a place where you can find a lot of information on reports, about over 200 reports on their website. The advice center is a place where you can ask questions to experts of the center, or get referred to experts like Johnny and me to advise you on specific questions on doing business in China. The training center, I think this webinar is part of it. We work together with partners where we exchange knowledge on doing business in China, and the SME advocacy platform, which is run by the EU SME, which is run by the EU CCC, that tries to defend your case in the Chinese economy, so that there's, for example, a level playing field for foreign companies in China. If we look at the knowledge center more clearly, there's over 200 reports, I said, and it is interesting to see that the EU SME Center has gone with the Chinese economy. In the past, there was a lot of information of food and beverage, maybe, but now we see very active topics like healthcare, environment, green tech, AI, and even blockchain was recently promoted as content from the EU SME Center. There's also the website where you can ask questions and ask an expert on doing business in China. I think you can log on the website and register at the website for free. I think that's great that's so much information available for you. A thing that I also want to mention is the Self-Diagnostic Tool. I think the Self-Diagnostic Tool covers a lot of information we are discussing today. So it covers things like, do you understand maybe the culture in China? Do you understand the different channels of entry? How to deal maybe with contracts? So it asks us a lot of questions on if you're ready, or if you thought about doing business in China. So also a free tool. I'm Dutch, and so I like everything that's free. So I would definitely support everybody to join this self-diagnostic tool. For the upcoming events of the EU SME Center, there are many different events. We just saw already from the Cleantech Route China, there's a lot of interesting events. But the EU SME Center also has a lot of interesting events where you can participate on water management, building and design, the Hainan Free Trade Port, cross-border e-commerce. So a lot of information is for free and available. And I would really urge you to follow this. If you're interested in China, try to follow these webinars or read this report, because there's a lot of valuable information for you to absorb when doing business. When going to China and start doing business in China. So, very quickly about me, because then we go into the presentation on the practical steps. So Robert Goris, Director of Northern Europe for the Sovereign Group, recently moved from China to Brussels. My focus is on corporate structuring and compliance in China. And I'm very happy here today that I am able to share this information with you. What I'm going to discuss today, the 14th five-year plan. I know there's going to be another presentation on the 14th five-year plan in a later stage, but I think it is important to discuss the 14th five-year plan because it's an essential part of when you enter the Chinese market. So I will quickly discuss what it is, and then I will discuss on market entry, the perception, the reality of doing business in China, how to address these challenges, why enter, and also what is the right structure. Then Johnny will take over and we'll do a Q&A. So with further ado, I think let's dive into the content of the presentation. The 14th five-year plan. That's a very important document in China. I think last year there was a plan, the fifth plan, which is a party activity where the party sets goals or sets guidelines, makes recommendations towards the government on what should be in the 14th five-year plan. And they promote like broad themes, like for example, high-speed growth, with high-speed quality, rebalancing an economy with supply-side structural reform, a lot of big words, expanding domestic demand while continuing to support international export markets. That's the dual strategy. If you have read a little bit upon China policy, the dual strategy is often mentioned. So that is focuses on expanding domestic demand, what is already mentioned in the intro, but also continuing support of international export markets. And driving modernization through the innovation is a theme, and promoting high-end intelligence and green production. So these are very broad themes that were introduced by the party as recommendations. But from those recommendations, there needs to be a 14th five-year plan. And that's done during the two sessions. The two sessions was beginning of this year, where the 14th five-year plan was promoted. And then is where the government really sets fixed indicators. There are 5 themes, 20 indicators, and certain indicators are, for example, urbanization by 2025 should be 65%, or the share of surface water should become better, class 3, and must reach 85% by the end of the plan. So very clear indicators, and I'm going to go quickly into those indicators, not all of them, but to give you an idea. So I mentioned that there are 5 themes. On the next slide, there are other 2 themes. So we have economic development, innovation, people well-being, clean ecology, and security and safety. And what I think is, I'm not going to go into each specific indicator, but I think what is mostly interesting is what is on the side. It's indicative and binding indicators. On the next slide, you will see all binding indicators, and indicative indicators are indicators that are nice to have, right? So the government wants to push for it, but it's a nice to have. And binding criteria are things they must achieve. The things they have set to themselves, we must achieve this. And then, for example, here, the years of education for the working age people needs to go up. So these are things that are good to know. And I think the next slide is where it is very clear and very valuable, I think, for entering the Chinese market. For example, in green ecology, security and safety, these are all binding indicators. So the Chinese government has set themselves like, we will achieve these goals. So if you are in a specific industry and you know that this is falls within the binding indicators of the Chinese government, this is a clear opportunity. So for example, reducing energy, if you're in energy, if you are in wastewater, or if you're in certain agricultural fields or in technology, I think there are clear indicators, binding even indicators, that there are opportunities for you. If we broaden that a little bit on where I see the opportunities are following the 14th five-year plans, I think we can divide it in four major themes: technology, healthcare, education, and clean energy. If we talk about technology, things like AI, semiconductors, IoT, interconnectivity is a clear opportunity. Healthcare, elderly care, biotech is a clear opportunity, I believe. Education, I think education is a little bit of a tricky one, because education is an industry that's very highly regularized, or very much looked at the Chinese government, so you don't have a lot of freedom to move there as a company. Clean energy, I think energy upgrades, efficiency, water treatment, I think in that sense everything has to do with sustainability or the environment is a clear opportunity. The 14th five-year plan also has indicated major areas of focus. One is the Greater Bay Area. That has a clear focus with Hong Kong and Macau and places like Shenzhen, Dongguan, Guangzhou, Foshan. These are very interesting areas where a lot of focus by the Chinese government is put on. But also Hainan is a place of interest where there's a free trade zone, a free trade port is built, and a medical fast track where you can promote medical devices, where there's an easier access to the market for medical devices, for example. So I think these are the key factors for the 14th five-year plan. And as you see, there's a lot of opportunities, binding indicators that can be an opportunity for you as a company. So I think that's very good news. So then we go into market entry. And the perception of doing business in China is is sometimes a wonderland, right? It's a huge market, 1.3 billion people. I always use the example, I don't know if it's an urban legend, but the example has been expressed many times, where Gillette at one point wanted to enter the Chinese market with deodorant. They made the analysis, 1.3 billion people, that's 2.6 billion armpits, that's going to be a business. But they forgot that at that time nobody in China used deodorant. So it is maybe a perception of a wonderland, and there's a lot of opportunities, but my thought is that in reality it is a minefield. It is a minefield because there's a lot of things unclear, and you are unfortunately will not be the first company not making it in China. There have been companies before you that have lost thousands, 100,000, maybe millions of dollars, euros in entering China. So being prepared is very important. And I would like to explain why I think, and why people with me think, why China is challenging. And so you know where to look for. So why is China challenging? I think the big reason why China is challenging is because it's geographically fragmented. China is a huge place. It's slightly bigger than the US. And I think from a cultural perspective, it looks a lot like Europe, of course, very different. But what I mean with that is, in this massive landmass that China has, there are many different ethnic groups. There are 8 languages spoken. There are 56 different ethnic groups. The climate is different, the food is different, the development is different. And I think that's a very much similar sometimes to Europe, right? Europe is also a place where a lot of different cultures, different languages are spoken. For example, I already mentioned it, I'm Dutch, my wife is Belgian. We lived an hour from each other. I'm on the Dutch side, she on the Belgian side, and I know that there's still a world of difference between the Dutch and the Belgians. So if there's already such a big difference in such a small area, you can imagine that in China, with such a big landmass, there's also a massive amount of difference. So you can't see China as just one place. Secondly, I think there's a frustrating regulatory environment. What I mean with that is, for example, what is often mentioned also in the news is the idea of rule by law and versus rule of law, where we in Europe have rule of law, where there's a law and that is there to protect you and guide you. But in China, it's what I say is rule by law, is that the laws may be there, but it's only used to help the party or help to guide policy. It's not there really to protect you. Of course, it's I'm saying it now very in a nutshell, but I think that's the general perception. Vague and confusing regulations. Sometimes regulations even contradict each other. So that's because China is growing so fast that regulation not always is lagging behind the development of China, and also an uneven enforcement of those regulations. If you look, for example, at the Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, these are big cities where sometimes regulations are more enforced. And if you look at places more inland, where these enforcements are less, but also compared to companies, foreign companies, domestic companies, where enforcement is a little bit uneven sometimes. Multiple agencies, jurisdictions. China is a very big place, and there are pockets of regulatory differences. For example, Hainan is now an area that is very much in development, and a lot of new policies there that only apply to Hainan. Or in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, there were policies. Or maybe there are policies and specific rules in Western China that are different from other places. So it could be very complex, and doing your homework is very key in that. So rapid development, I think, is also a very big challenge for people doing business in China. I think this is a picture of the Pudong of Shanghai. 30 years ago, it was farmland, and now it has the tallest buildings in the world. So, and that massive change is sometimes difficult for foreign companies to handle. It goes so quick that the moment the European company has decided to make a certain move, the market has already changed. So there's a very different approach on it. And because of that rapid change, consumer taste has changed rapidly, and the market conditions changed rapidly. So 12 years ago, when I came to China, there was something like QQ. There was a messaging app. But now everything is WeChat, and QQ is disappeared. And I think what gave a very good picture. So Johnny, I know you're going to be later on the call. I stole this picture from Johnny. He posted a few days ago on his LinkedIn, the Life Change Index. This shows how much China has changed over a few last decades compared to other nations. So let me quickly, I think Belgium is here and China is there. So that shows you that there's so much change in China that you can't just pack your bags and move from Belgium or from Europe to China and think you will understand. You need to immerse yourself in this to really understand. So I think a commitment to China is important to succeed there. And Johnny, thank you for posting that picture. It was very informative. I think another challenge for China is an immature market. As I said, highly fragmented, minimal brand value, and price usually is the key. So highly fragmented. What I mean with this is like, again, the wishes of somebody in Shanghai or the wishes of somebody in Beijing are very different. And I think that needs to be thought of. So if you want to enter China, you should really think about where in China. Do your research. Where is the market? Should I go to Beijing? Should I go to Shanghai? Should I go inland? Should I go to second-tier cities? So everything can be a specific strategy. And because of the immature market, there's minimal brand value we see. Because everything is new for a lot of consumers, or many consumers buy something for the first time. And that could be like consumers of like consumer products, but I think also for business to business. Like if you're talking about the agricultural industry, a lot of companies buy their agricultural machines for the first time and really upgrading their industry. So there's not really a brand value that they have worked on with many years. And unfortunately, price is still usually key. I think that's an element that is changing quickly, where quality and service are becoming appreciated, but I think generally price is usually still key. Another reason why China is challenging is because of a local company advantage. We see that there's a restraint on foreign invested enterprises, targeted regulatory enforcement, government support, indigenous innovation policies, and limited financing options. So we see that there's still a lot of, there's more opportunities for Chinese firms, and Chinese domestic firms are let free more easily than foreign companies. If there is a foreign company that is not compliant, they will definitely find it and fine you more than another Chinese company. So there's a targeted regulatory enforcement. And I think as a company, you need to be aware of that. Many people, when they come to China, they say like, we're in China, as in China, do as the Chinese, as when in Rome, do as the Romans. But I think as a foreign company, you really need to be doubtful of that statement. Yes, you're in China, you need to adjust to the Chinese market, the Chinese wishes, but I don't think you should do a Chinese company in the compliance side. So we often see that Chinese companies don't always follow all the compliances by the letter of the law. And I think I wouldn't advise any foreign company to do that, because at one moment it will come back to you. Other point, limited financing options. So a foreign company can't easily go to the bank and find financing options or capital. It's really restricted for domestic companies. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but it's definitely a challenge. I think everything I say today is on a general basis. Maybe you as an individual company have been able to do it or will be able to do it. But I think in general, these are the challenges that are there for for foreign companies operating in China. So we had a lot of challenges. We discussed what is difficult, but then let's see how we can address those challenges and make it easier to operate in the Chinese market. And I think it's pretty simple. And I think everybody knows this, but for some reason, when we see companies coming to China, they almost always leave their brains at home. For some reason, when they come to China, they see the opportunities, they see the big countries, and they make choices that they would have never made in Europe when they would enter another country. And I think if you want to enter the Chinese market correctly, you need to at least ask 5 basic questions. Are my products or services suitable for the Chinese market? What's the competitive situation? Are there potential partners needed? What is the best channel for market? And what structure is needed, or any? I think, are my products service suitable? Have you done the research? Have you been to China? Is there maybe something already available in your field? And what's the competitive situation? Are there other foreign companies coming to China that are competitors? Are there domestic competitors on the market that maybe will make your life a little bit difficult? Do you need a partner in China? And if you need a partner, what kind of partner do you need? And do research on your partner if you find one. Don't take the first partner you meet on an expo. And what's the best channel to market? What ways are there to enter the market? I will touch upon that a little bit later in the presentation, because there's not entering China doesn't automatically mean setting up a company and having boots on the ground. There are many different ways to enter the Chinese market, and because there are many different ways of entering the Chinese market, what structure do you need for that? And then I think we come to an important point on then why do I need to enter the market? Why? So you've done all this research, you've answered these questions, and then why do I need to enter the market? Why do I need boots on the ground? And I think companies need to understand what the strategic reasons for entry are. Maybe it's an attractive market, clear opportunities. I've mentioned the binding factors, the binding indicators for the Chinese government. This could be a clear indication that I see that this is happening. I fit within this binding criteria, so that's why I want to go to the Chinese market. And that could be a pull factor. I think a clear example of a pull factor was in the time when the car industry came to China. Volkswagen, for example, Volkswagen asked their suppliers to say, we're going to China, so you need to go to China. So that's a clear pull factor of why to go there. Maybe there's a competitive threat. Other competitors of you are going to the Chinese market. Maybe you also need to go to the Chinese market because you don't want to lose your existing clients because competitors are going to the Chinese market. Maybe there's a push factor that's, for example, for cost saving. Cost saving could be a push factor for you because you want to make something in China that's cheaper, or maybe find even the talent in China. I think a clear push factor for example, for the medical industry or the biotech industry is that in China, certain regulations are more relaxed on doing research or doing clinical testing in China. So that's a clear push factor of why you would go to China. But I think, again, these questions are important for yourself to answer. Then, how to come to China, and what are the steps? What are the different ways to enter the Chinese market? I would like to discuss the difficulties and the risks of the different methods. So I've made this slide in such a way on difficulty and risk. And I said already in my talk that when you enter the Chinese market, it doesn't automatically mean that you need to have boots on the ground, because there are different ways of doing it. Direct export. If a Chinese company comes to your company and says, we want to buy your product, and we do it FOB, they do everything, they pay their bill, and it comes to China. I think that's not bad, right? You're selling your products and it's going to China. It doesn't take you a lot of work, but of course the difficulties maybe you have no control, but maybe also not so many worries about it. Next step maybe is a licensing agreement with companies in China to either produce or sell. There you could maybe see a branding risk, a production risk in China. Another step, what we see is a distribution or dealer. So if you go to China and you do a dealer or distribution search for China to sell your products in your name. And I think there, what is often mentioned is you find a distributor and the distributor says like, ah, yes, I would really like to do that, but I want to have exclusivity. And our advice always is like, never give exclusivity, or if you give exclusivity, make very clear points in the contract on what that exclusivity means and the minimal amount of products that should be bought from you. Because again, when I said in the beginning of the presentation, China is a huge, huge place. Not one distributor is able to cover the whole of China. I think it's impossible. Same in Europe, you wouldn't have one distributor for Europe, right? That's the same for China. So therefore, we always say never give directly exclusivity to a distributor. Next step would be establishing a rep office. A rep office is a satellite. It represents your company in China, but it doesn't be able to do any commercial activity, and it leads an investment. You need to have personnel there, you need to have an accounting there, you need to have an office there. So it's a bigger investment. The last step we always see, even though I'm in the business of setting up companies and providing support and accounting, our last step always is to advise establishing a company, because establishing a company it's difficult, it's costly, it takes a lot of investment, it takes a lot of commitment from a company to enter the Chinese market, and you need to be ready for that. It's not, you can't like tiptoe your way into China by setting up a company. It's a real commitment. And I think these are the different ways to enter the Chinese market. Of course, if you establish a foreign invested enterprise, there's a lot of things you need to think about, but it goes a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation. I want to come back to the beginning of the presentation where I said your self-diagnostic tool. A lot of the things I've discussed is also discussed in the self-diagnostic tool. Again, it's for free. Take it. A lot of questions are asked that makes you think, and I think that's also key for entering the Chinese market, to think about the Chinese market, what all the elements are there that could be new for you. Quickly, I want to discuss what kind of structures is right for you. If you saw the slide with the graph, you have the representative office and the foreign invested enterprise option. I think these are two structures. One structure that is could be valuable for companies like you is to have a representative office. If you, for example, choose to have a distribution network there, but want to control your distribution network, a representative office could be valuable. It does have some requirements. Your company needs to be at least 2 years old. And it's an extension of your parent company, so it's not an independent legal entity. It has a limited activity scope, meaning that you can only do marketing and government relations or relationship management, but you can't do any business. You can't sign any contracts in China. I think this is an interesting setup for companies that help Chinese companies outside of China. So they want to have boots on the ground in China to talk to their clients, but most of the activity and the clients is outside of China. Another option is a typical foreign invested enterprise, the WOFE, stands for Wholly Foreign Owned Enterprise, meaning that all the shares of the company are owned by a foreign individual or entity, a foreign invested company. That is a limited liability company. That means that risk is fixed within the entity. I think that's always good to know if you enter the Chinese markets. It's also, most commercial activities are allowed. Not everything was allowed. If you remember in the beginning, I said education is a difficult industry. For example, education is an industry that is highly regulated. That's, for example, not every foreign company can enter that. But also there are certain elements in the agriculture. For example, seed production is seen as a strategic industry by China, so you can't go into seed production or cultivation of seeds. So there are different elements you can and cannot go into. Then I think the last structure I want to quickly mention is the joint venture structure. This is useful for restricted industries. What I mentioned, for example, if you're in the seed business or sometimes in education or in cloud computing or in autonomous driving, these are industries that are restricted, but through the ways of a joint venture and having a partner, you are able to enter into this market. There's a lot of information online on what is called the negative list. So if you're in a business, type in the negative list. I think the Eu Sme Center and FIT also has a lot of information about the negative list, which industry maybe need to have a joint venture structure. It's also one of the most complex structures and needs a lot of preparation. So don't go into a joint venture just like, I met somebody on the trade show. It was a nice person, I trust him completely, and we are going to do a joint venture together. It has a lot of preparation, it's a lot of risk involved. The upside could be very big, but you need to commit. So as I said, what's the good thing about a joint venture is the potentially faster time to market, but a high risk of failure. If you look at all the joint ventures that have been made in the past in China, a lot of are unsuccessful. That doesn't mean that you can't be successful, but it needs, again, a lot of commitment. And I trust Johnny will highlight a little bit how you can make a joint venture successful. Johnny has worked on joint ventures and advised foreign companies on this. So I'm pretty sure that he has some points to discuss there. The key thing also is when a joint venture is having an exit strategy, because let's say if it doesn't work, what are you gonna do to say goodbye to sometimes an unfortunate relationship? Key messages I want to share with you that I always tell people. It's, I think, lessons that you need to bring with you when you go to China. Everything is possible in China, but nothing is easy. When it sounds too good to be true, it's probably not true in China. Guanxi dies or goes to jail. A lot of people say that I have good Guanxi, I can help you make a shortcut. But I think as a foreign company, you should not take shortcuts because it will come back to you at one point. I think China is a trust society. I think definitely trust each other, but verify the trust, because you would do the same in Europe. Why not trust? Why not verify the trust also in China? So I think if you remember anything from this presentation, I hope these 4 points will guide you successfully towards your China activity. Quickly, the upcoming events for the Eu Sme Center on, I think, also a lot of industries that are interesting: smart water, building design, the Hainan Free Trade Port. I think definitely interesting to look at. But this is all online. You can also find. There's going to be 11 new reports out, so please view the the website, the EU SME Center, for all free information. So thank you. I think with this, I'm going to quickly hand the mic over to Johnny.
Okay, Robert, that was really a great presentation. I mean, this was really clear, and I have really seen all the steps you actually explained. And I really want to share with the audience, first of all, you do need to do these things, okay? They are very important that you follow this kind of a process of due diligence and you ask yourself the questions, because there is some kind of risk involved, and of course there is also an opportunity. Now, as Robert also said, it's a very different place. And I'm going to try and give you, in a very short time, in 15 minutes, give you a taste of how different it is. So I'll start sharing my presentation. Can you see my presentation? Okay. A second.
Yes, Johnny, we can see it.
Okay. Voila. Good. First, very quickly. Yeah, my friends in China, they say I am an egg. I am white on the outside, but somehow they feel I've become a little bit yellow on the inside. So it seems to be a compliment. I run a company in clean energy and carbon. I'm also owner of another company that provides strategic consulting and coaching on China. I'm setting up a fund with a bunch of contacts on those 4 industries. And I also work with the European Chamber. I'm chairing the environmental working group Shanghai. Yeah, I'm married in China. I've been there for 20 years and I like it. At this moment, actually, I'm not in China. I'm in Belgium, in Edigem, for 1 more month. So if you would like to meet in person, it is very possible. So 3 things that I think are important for you to get a feel of how different China is. First of all, the digitization of the whole value chain. What does it mean for your go-to-market strategy? China is a planned economy. Well, that affects your business strategy. And business partnerships, well, they are, of course, with Chinese characteristics. So what does that mean? China is upgrading its whole industrial value chain. And this is much more impactful than you can imagine. I can share with you a very interesting sharing from the State Council just after COVID in March last year, where they were announcing that they were going to speed up the digitization, which already had started. This is the China 2025 manufacturing, actually. So imagine this. All the state-owned enterprises, private companies, institutes, universities, entrepreneur companies, even the farmers, they are all being connected to one digital system with very high bandwidth. And the data which is available in the country, and as you know, China does monitor data. You can see this very well in how the virus is being managed, what they can do with the data. Well, this data is now being centralized and being made available in a central way to those value chain. And they are igniting entrepreneurial companies to play with the different stakeholders in this industrial value chain to create a systemic upgrade of this value chain over the next 2, 3, 4 years to 2025. So imagine this, all processes, products, cooperations, models, getting access to big data and getting access to artificial intelligence to get an upgrade. So that's what is happening. And it's a planned economy. I'll explain in a minute. It means it is rolled out very systematically. So what does it mean for your go-to-market? Not sure if you know this, but at this moment, you can actually access a lot of people in China very quickly if you use the digital channels. Now, it's not so obvious for a foreign company to just go and access those people. There are indeed very specific rules and regulations, but it is possible in the Chinese way. And this actually means that if you work with the right kind of parties that can give you access, you can go at a much faster speed and at a much lower cost into this market, and also understand the market before you go into this market. It also allows you to, over the value chain, in a strategic way, determine which are the places where I'm going to play. And it's important to actually have a multi-point approach and to figure out where can I be a catalyst or a facilitator more than just only a control. If you're a control, you're vulnerable. Although you might think you're in control, actually you're vulnerable. Multi-point means you are much more protected. Now, what is the window of opportunity? You might want to go to China and think in terms of there's a market for me, but you might also think that what is happening there is a bit ahead of a curve. When I arrived in China 20 years ago, they were 10 years behind. When I'm now in China, I see a country where the modern cities are 5 years ahead. Of course, we still have the countryside, which is maybe still 50 years behind, but they all have access to these modern tools. This is why digital farming is going incredibly fast. So how much are you, for example, able to enjoy a systemic upgrade of your processes and actually get an innovative boost working in China? First point. Second point. So China is a planned economy. What does that mean? Well, it means there is no debate between political parties about what is wrong and what is right. Now, this is where I want to also raise the issue of how politics and media are basically talking about China. And by the way, China also talking about the West. It is at this moment not very nice, as you know for sure. But I want to clearly make sure that the business people in China, they are business people just like you, and they want to work and do business. But they also understand what is the context of this planned economy. It's not something you can ignore. It's something you can't row against the flow, but you can definitely get wind under your wings by understanding where things are going. And China works basically very systematically in a triple helix model. So there's a central government, just like Robert showed just now, with goals, with KPI being rolled out. Now, at the provincial levels, at the city levels, at the industrial levels, these are all translated into sub-KPI to roll them out. So for example, certain provinces are going to get a certain requirement. This could be more for one industry or more for one aspect of the country. For example, security of food can be anything. So the different parts of the country have very specific goals and where they need to contribute to where the country is going. And the government, the local government, is basically having this task. Now, the government officials, they go up or down, depending to what extent they can actually help implement the planned economy. And this is very interesting because next to these governments, you then have the institutes, the universities. This is where all the research is happening. And then, of course, you have the industry, which in a very dynamic way tries to understand where are the opportunities that come with this. If I can help the government implement some of these things with some of the research that's going on, or I can innovate, for example, with the institutes to find solutions, then I'm going to get wind under my wings. I'm going to fly. So there is, I always say, China also has CSR, and it's somewhat similar to the concept of CSR that we know in the West. But in China, it's actually country social responsibility. And this is actually at the level of all of these three pillars, and even at the level of the people. This is also why, although China has only one party, they do have a lot of support from the people. Now, if you understand this and you can find a way to work together in these three, with these three stakeholders in this triple helix model, you can get an endorsed and a facilitated rollout. What do I mean with that? If you find a solution in one place and you have a cooperation with the government, you're being endorsed. If you have a local innovation, you're leading. And if you work with local entrepreneurs, you can tap into these most modern aspects of the digital value chain that can help you speed up. Now, if your model works in one place, you don't need to go and promote it, brand it, advertise it in other regions. Although these regions are different, almost like different countries, like Robert explained, the local people there understand from their perspective what they need to do from the planned economy in their region with their challenges, what they need. And they understand how your solution in one place actually can help them. So you're going to get phone calls. Could you come please here and also do the same thing? It surprises me each time when this happens, when we really found a solution that works. 2. 3, partnerships with Chinese characteristics. I want you to be aware that China at this moment is in the Yang Wei period, which means we want to implement or use the foreign things for China's purposes. There was a time in the past where China would be like, oh, this is from abroad. Wow, we want this because this must be much better than we have. So, and over the time, this has changed. China basically now has the opinion on the West and those who come to the West. Well, you want our market, of course, but your solution sometimes is outdated and you don't know this. And also you come with an opinion about how we should be doing things, which is quite annoying because in China, people first keep silent. They don't talk, they listen. And in the West, for example, we tend to start explaining, of course, how we want to help, how we have solutions, but it's just different. It's important to be aware of this. And the 80-20 cooperation transparency is something very interesting. So because this is a Chinese way of doing and thinking, you will see that when you work together with Chinese parties, and this is not only with foreigners, also Chinese people under each other, they are kind of putting on the table visibly what they're discussing to work together with you. But they won't talk about 80%, which is most relevant for them because this is a vulnerability. And of course, this is their opportunity. And they will get an alignment around the 20%, but they will make sure that what you bring is going to give them also the 80%. If you want to work with the Chinese party and you don't know what is the 80%, you're missing the point. They will knowing that. And it's important you know that because this gives you a chance that you go beyond one cycle. And I will explain this in a minute. Protection via the ecosystem basically means that if you're in this industrial value chain, have multiple control points or touch points, you're going to have different parties you're working with. You might be working with somebody in the government here, and you might be working with an entrepreneur there and with an institute there, and you might work with different people. So once you have a cooperation with Chinese people, you have a contract which clarifies the 20% in the right language to get the right kind of engagement. Then the question always is, so how much of that contract is going to be executed, right? How much can you rely on that? Well, I always say, wait until the big event comes, because the big event is organized. It's very fascinating. So the way it is explained, what is going to be done? And it's beautiful when you see Xi Jinping actually doing that. This is why the Chinese always have these words which sometimes sound bombastic or poetic or whatever, because for Chinese people, these characters, they are alive. Okay, they are representing much more than the words. If we in Belgium, for example, say east, west, home, best, also west, west, best, these are just 4 words, but you also know they carry a lot more, right? They carry the whole context of the feeling of being at home and so on. So Chinese language characters basically also carry that in almost all their words. So the way you express your cooperation with which kind of words to which kind of audience shows which kind of commitment you're giving. And that actually is your protection. It is what protects your IP. It's what protects your competitive position. That's why the ecosystem is so important. And this is why the triple helix is so important and the value chain. Now, context instead of time. As I just said, the language is different. Can you imagine? Chinese does not have times. They don't have past time, present tense, future tense. But they have all kinds of words which indicate context. So when you set up a cooperation with Chinese people, they think in terms of context. So we are bringing this to the table. 80-20, remember? Clear and unclear. And you're bringing that to the table, clear and unclear. Now, from the Western perspective, you're going to have like, okay, stage 1, year 1. And then after this year, we're going to review at the end of the year, we're going to go into the next year. And you may have a plan. But remember, the plan is 20%, not 100%. But the Chinese, they also have a plan. And this is the 80%. And they are having a timeline which is based on context. What do I mean with that? So today we work together on these topics. Not when 1 year has passed, but once these things have been achieved, what we have gotten from this cooperation, then this stage is finished. Suddenly you see the Chinese party change their behavior. They go to the next thing. Foreign party always says, what's happening? You're not keeping the agreement. Why are you doing this? And the Chinese party always says, why are you asking this question? Because for them, it is obvious. If you ask this question, basically, you're kind of out of the game because you're not understanding it. So on the other hand, if you, by that time, when this is finished, and you know this as well, because you also think in context, you're going to say, look, we could next work on this kind of cooperation, and you pick up something from their 80. Suddenly, you incredibly increase your position because you understand, you show you understand the game. Now, the game, you've got something unique. You're a foreigner. That means no Chinese can be more foreigner than you, in the same way that I also realize I can never be more Chinese than a Chinese, and I also do not intend to be. If in your strategy you can leverage in and outside of China, you always have an advantage which you will continuously be able to bring to the table. If you're doing something within China only, remember that unless you start innovating locally, unless you are able to adapt your products to the local buyers, local solution selling, whatever innovative solution you have, it's going to be outdated in 1 or 2 years. Unless you innovate locally, and you're going to have something new, which is very interestingly having Chinese characteristics, which is going to surprise you. It keeps surprising me. But those characteristics, they will also be very useful for you to know outside of China. And once you have a cooperation with China, you basically can go to other places. And you can, for example, think in the Belt and Road Initiative, or you can go simply to Latin America or Southeast Asia, because you have something to share in those areas and maybe also something to do together. Now, truth serves a purpose. As I said, there is talking and there is sharing, and there is also my duty. In China, the duty is kind of an accountability. So individual right is kind of an accountability. It's very interesting to discover this. If you ask what is the intrinsic motivation of a Chinese, well, I want this as a person, but as a son of my parents, I want this. As a person working with this government, I want this. So these are part of the motivation. This also means that I'm only supposed to tell you the truth if you are entitled to hear the truth. Because if you are not having this kind of a position with me, you are not really relevant. You're not part of this circle. Then why would I expose myself to you? Why would I reveal myself to you? So it's very important to understand how these things play, to understand how your relationship with the partner really is. And then the peaches and the coconuts. So when Western people come together, they come together like peaches. The skin is very thin on the outside, and very easily it breaks. So when it breaks, you have contact. So you get to know each other very quickly. The meat of the peach starts overlapping. Squeeze, some juice comes out, but the stone in there, the core, doesn't really overlap much. It's hard. Actually, it often not really overlaps. So the way people in the West cooperate is like this. Cooperate together very easily, but there's always some kind of like individualistic approach like you and me. Chinese are like coconuts. When they come together, they bounce. They don't trust each other. They don't trust other people. Very hard to get to know them. Very hard, because this is the outside of the coconut. You have to really break through that coconut. But once you break through, what happens then? There's no stone. There's only liquid. The liquid flows together completely. So when you're working in China and you're able to have this kind of a cooperation, you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable because you are getting certain kind of responsibilities that you need to take care of the other party. It's very strange. You need to take care of a supplier or of a customer if they're in trouble, because they're part of the ecosystem, they're part of the circle. If you're outside the circle, I mean, you're one of 1.4 billion. If you don't have food, you die. But if you're within the circle, that means you won't be killed and you will be protected in this multi-point, because I want to protect you. Now, this is very important because things change so quickly in China. And as Robert also mentioned, there are these lists with invited industries and, for example, industries which are prohibited. And China is very opportunistic. And let's be honest, many countries are like this. There is a regulatory system which kind of indicates what the country focuses on, what they want, what they don't want. And China is very protective in this way, and you need to know this, because you might, for example, be very welcome and start doing something, and you feel great, and then suddenly things start getting harder. For example, specifically in the Cleantech, the environmental consultancy and the soil and groundwater, a lot opening in the beginning, but now because the knowledge is available, it suddenly has to be localized, it's protected, it's very difficult. So if you then haven't made it as a coconut to enter the ecosystem, you're vulnerable. If you're part of the ecosystem, you will have discussions with them in a much more transparent way, because you are part of the 80-20 discussion. They'll be telling you, hey, you know, don't you have this kind of knowledge in the West, or don't you have this kind of insight here in China that can help us to do something? You can have actually a totally different kind of cooperation, and you will be guided into that. And that basically means you can go into the next cycle. And you also start becoming part of the discussions of context instead of time. And this is where you can start being ahead of the curve, seeing where are the new opportunities. And they come, of course, with the local clients, local solutions, and they come with the local governments, which are indicating where's the next stage the government wants to take the country. And of course, with the universities, what are we able to do here? Because there's a lot of money being invested in China in some of these new systemic disruptive solutions. So I will end here with ride the wave until you become the wave, because this is from Li Bai. It's a Chinese poet. It was painted by a Japanese painter, and it used in-depth painting techniques from Europe. For me, this is a token that cooperation can be possible, and actually a very nice cooperation. Changfeng Polang basically stands for, if the wind is very strong, the storm is very strong, the waves can actually become very high, and that can be very scary. And the world of today has this kind of challenge, but circular economy and markets are presenting an opportunity to create change. Changes are happening faster than ever. Now, if the wind is very strong and the waves are touching the sky, if you can kind of surf on those waves, you can touch the sky and you can do amazing things. So this is the expression. Remember, east-west, home-west. For the Chinese, this is what's currently happening. They're engaging in the process. You can be part of the people surfing on those waves, but you need to learn how to surf, because falling off a wave, you will be drinking some salty water. Doesn't taste nice, but I think surfing is fun. And this is why I keep having fun in China and working with people that want to do something with China. This is my last slide. These are my contact details. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also have me on WhatsApp and so on. I very much like cooperating with people. And I'm going to share in the chat, as was requested by Laura, a link for a survey. One second. Voila. That I hope you all to complete. You can do it after the event, because I think I'd like to now give the word back to Ms. Surings, and then prepare for the questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny and Robert, for sharing your valuable insights and expertise. I can imagine there are some questions and comments from the audience. I already saw one interesting question. But before we go to the Q&A session, I will give a short overview of the support and promotion tools we have available for Flemish companies. I hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Michelle, we can see the screen.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michelle Surings. I'm the Deputy Director for East Asia at the International Trade Department of Flanders Investment and Trade. As said, I will give an overview of the support and export promotion tools we have available. Unfortunately, most of the information I will present is in Dutch, and most of the services we offer are only for Flemish companies available. So my presentation will be in Dutch. Ik ga kort een paar vormen van ondersteuning en exportpromotie geven op verschillende niveaus, op Vlaams niveau, Belgisch niveau en ook kort op Europees niveau. Wat Vlaanderen betreft, uiteraard kan u steeds terecht bij de partners die in de vorige presentatie rond Cleantech Route China reeds aan bod kwamen. Ik ga zelf nog kort even inzoomen op Flanders Investment and Trade, want Flanders Investment and Trade is het agentschap van de Vlaamse overheid dat werd opgericht om de Vlaamse export te ondersteunen en om buitenlandse investeerders naar Vlaanderen aan te trekken. Wij hebben in Vlaanderen 5 kantoren ter beschikking van de Vlaamse exporteurs, 1 per provinciehoofdstad, en daar vindt u telkens onze adviseurs internationaal ondernemen. Wanneer u op hen beroep doet, dan is dat steeds gratis. Zij zijn uw eerste aanspreekpunt voor alle mogelijke informatie die u nodig heeft bij het exporteren, hulp die u wenst, vragen die u heeft, subsidieaanvragen die u graag beantwoord wilt zien, enzovoort. Daarnaast hebben wij ook een netwerk in het buitenland. We hebben een 90-tal kantoren verspreid over de verschillende continenten. En we zijn uiteraard ook vertegenwoordigd in het Verre Oosten. Daarnaast, of voor een stukje ingebed in onze kantoren, hebben we ook 10 Science and Technology Offices. Die zijn gevestigd in New York, Palo Alto, Parijs, Londen, Kopenhagen, München, Mumbai, Singapore, Tokio en last but not least ook in Guangzhou. Een van de opdrachten van deze Science and Technology Officers is om de Vlaamse bedrijven, de onderzoekscentra, clusters, ondernemingsorganisaties, incubatoren, acceleratoren enzovoort te connecteren met de juiste relevante buitenlandse spelers. Denk dan bijvoorbeeld aan sectorgenoten, prospects, partners, distributeurs, maar ook bijvoorbeeld potentiële investeerders, kapitaalverstrekkers en zelfs buitenlands talent. Deze Science and Technology Offices hebben elk hun eigen geografische focus en ook een specifiek focusdomein. Voor China is dat het domein Digital Health en dan ook een stukje Health Tech. En waar nodig ondersteuning ook op vlak van Climate Tech. Ons netwerk in Greater China, 5 kantoren. We zitten in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou met een plus, omdat daar binnenkort onze Science and Technology Officer van start gaat. Hij zal in de zomer daar op post zijn. En dan nog 2 kantoren in buiten mainland China, in Hongkong en in Taiwan. Waarvoor kan u bij hen terecht? Onze buitenlandkantoren beantwoorden ook uw vragen specifiek gelinkt aan de betrokken exportmarkt. Zij kunnen eventueel ondersteuning bieden bij specifieke problemen of u doorverwijzen naar de juiste actoren die u kunnen bijstaan.
Michelle, sorry, uw PowerPoint verspringt niet. Ze blijft vaststaan op de eerste slide.
Michel, gewoon op F5 duwen.
Nog steeds niet?
Nee.
Ik zal even stoppen met delen en opnieuw delen.
Ook als je gewoon naar presentation mode gaat, ga je waarschijnlijk dat de juiste manier krijgen.
Nu zien we ze goed.
Oké. En verspringen ze nu mee, de slides?
Ze mee.
Oké. Mijn excuses. Voilà, dan dat voor... nee, ik ga nog even een kleine toelichting geven bij onze buitenlandkantoren. Dus wat zij daarnaast ook doen, is u in contact brengen met potentiële Chinese zakenpartners. Dat kan zowel gebeuren op individuele basis, dus wanneer u op individuele prospectiereis gaat, maar ook begeleiding via groepsactiviteiten zoals groepszakenreizen of beursdeelnames. Dan is er ook heel wat informatie beschikbaar op onze website. Zo vindt u daar bijvoorbeeld de exportgids. De exportgids is eigenlijk een handleiding voor Vlaamse bedrijven die willen starten met exporteren, die een exportplan willen opstarten. U vindt hierbij richtlijnen over hoe u uw markten kan kiezen en verkennen, hoe u de marktbenadering aanpakt, hoe u dit financieel, juridisch en logistiek voorbereidt. Er is ook een luikje over marketing. U kan dat uiteraard allemaal zelf bestuderen, maar wie dat wenst, kan dat zeker doen onder begeleiding van een van onze adviseurs internationaal ondernemen. Daarnaast zijn er ook nog een aantal specifieke dossiers te vinden in deze exportgids. Dat gaat vaak over actuele onderwerpen. Op dit moment is er bijvoorbeeld een coronadossier beschikbaar. Er is ook een Brexit-dossier. U vindt er ook een dossiertje over Expo Dubai, waaraan wij later dit jaar nog zullen deelnemen. En u vindt er ook een aantal rapporten en analyses over de wereldeconomie, bilaterale handel enzovoort. Verder vindt u op de website ook een aantal landenpagina's. Op die landenpagina's is vaak een luikje opgenomen over het coronavirus en de situatie in de lokale markt. Daarnaast vindt u cijfergegevens over de betrokken markt, kansrijke sectoren, tips, tricks, do's en don'ts over zaken doen. De relevante wetgeving en regelgeving. U vindt er ook reisinformatie en nuttige adressen. En u vindt er de overzichten van de acties en events die we organiseren op de betrokken markt. U vindt er ook de handelsvoorstellen en aanbestedingen die onze buitenlandkantoren voor u gedetecteerd hebben. En u vindt er de marktstudies en nieuwsberichten. Een greep uit de marktstudies voor China die op dit moment beschikbaar zijn, onder meer eentje over de health food market, over innovatie, over water treatment industry, nanotechnologie. Maar er is nog veel meer beschikbaar. Dat is allemaal gratis te downloaden op onze website. U vindt er ook de informatie over de subsidiëring en financiering die beschikbaar is voor Vlaamse exporteurs. Er zijn 5 types van financiering, van subsidiëring die wij voorzien. U vindt hier het overzicht. Ik ga ze niet in detail behandelen, want ik zie dat we een beetje over tijd aan het gaan zijn. Belangrijk om te weten is dat voor het tweede type, dus de subsidiëring voor buitenlandse beurs- en niche-events, op dit moment ook kan aangewend worden voor virtuele evenementen of andere alternatieven dan de fysieke evenementen die uiteraard door de coronapandemie niet kunnen plaatsvinden op dit moment. Dan nog 2 uitzonderlijke financierings pakketten. Ten eerste was er de bijzondere exportsteun Brexit voor ervaren exporteurs. Die oproep is intussen afgelopen. Op dit moment is er geen nieuws of er een nieuwe oproep zal komen. Er was ook een starterspakket internationalisering. Die oproep is afgelopen, maar er zal een nieuwe oproep komen in september 2021. Voor wie is dit bedoeld? Dat gaat eigenlijk over een subsidie voor Vlaamse KMO's die nog nooit eerder een subsidie van FIT gekregen hebben. We mikken hierbij op vooral innovatieve ondernemingen die starten met exporteren. Indien u graag op de hoogte wordt gehouden wanneer dat die oproep opnieuw opgestart wordt, dan kan u best een account maken via onze website, een MyFit-account, en daar aanduiden dat u dergelijke informatie wilt ontvangen via mailings of nieuwsbrieven. Dan tot slot nog de acties en events die wij organiseren. Voor 2021 hebben we nog een aantal acties op het programma staan. Wat in het rood aangemerkt is, staat nog op het programma, maar de inschrijvingen zijn helaas afgesloten. De andere acties die staan nog steeds open. Het eerste op het programma, dat zijn de Cleantech Route China webinars waarmee we vandaag van start zijn gegaan. Ze lopen nog tot 1 mei, elke dinsdagochtend om 9 uur. Verder hebben we nog een virtuele groepszakenreis naar Chengdu en Chongqing gepland van 7 tot 11 juni. Daarvoor kan nog steeds ingeschreven worden. We nemen deel aan de IE Expo in Guangzhou van 15 tot 17 september. Dat is een Cleantech Expo, zoals daar straks ook al is toegelicht door Sarah. Verder nemen we deel aan de China International Logistics and Supply Chain Fair van 23 tot 25 september, uiteraard voor de logistieke sector. We staan op Food and Hotel China van 9 tot 11 november. En we zijn ook aanwezig op de China High-Tech Fair van 17 tot 21 november. Tot slot hebben we ook nog een groepszakenreis op het programma met een focus op biotech, life sciences, medtech en healthcare onder leiding van minister-president Jan Bon. Die was gepland voor dit najaar, maar zoals de verwachtingen op dit moment zijn, zal reizen naar China niet mogelijk zijn en zullen we moeten uitstellen naar het voorjaar van 2022. Dan kort nog even iets over een federale vorm van ondersteuning voor exporteurs die eigenlijk weinig gekend is, maar al zeer dikwijls heel nuttig is gebleken. De federale overheid heeft een 5-tal douane-attachés uitgezonden naar de 4 BRICS plus Indonesië. Wat doen die douane-attachés? Zij bieden ondersteuning en inlichtingen uiteraard over douane- en accijnsregelgeving, bijvoorbeeld over verschuldigde belastingen bij invoer, over invoerprocedures, maar zij bieden ook ondersteuning bij specifieke problemen die u kan tegenkomen bij uitvoer. We hebben dus ook een douane-attaché in China, die is gevestigd in onze ambassade in Beijing. En dan het laatste stukje, de ondersteuning op Europees niveau. Zoals u daarnet al gehoord heeft, zeer uitgebreide en nuttige ondersteuning door het EU SME Center. Een gelijkaardig Center of Helpdesk bestaat er ook specifiek voor intellectuele eigendomsrechten, de China IP SME Helpdesk, die onze partner zal zijn voor het derde webinar, wanneer het specifiek over IP-bescherming in China gaat. Dan is er ook nog Enrich. Enrich is ook gepromoot door de Europese Commissie via Horizon 2020 en is eigenlijk een netwerk dat diensten aanbiedt, ondersteuning aanbiedt, specifiek voor science, technology en innovation bedrijven, sectoren, federaties enzovoort. Er is zowel ondersteuning op groepsniveau, op dit moment hoofdzakelijk in de vorm van webinars, maar zij geven ook individueel op maat gemaakt advies en ondersteuning. En dan tot slot de Access to Markets. Dat is de vroegere Market Access Database, een zeer nuttige website. Die valt onder de Europese Commissie, onder DG Trade. Daar vindt u allerlei informatie, onder meer over vrijhandelsakkoorden, informatie voor Europese exporteurs wat betreft importvoorwaarden in derde markten, importtarieven, procedures, documenten die u zou nodig hebben bij uw export, informatie over handelsbelemmeringen in specifieke markten, de sanitaire en fytosanitaire vereisten voor specifieke markten en een hele hoop statistieken en cijfergegevens. Dit is echt een zeer nuttig startpunt voor bedrijven die nieuwe markten verkennen. Voilà, dit was mijn presentatie. De conclusie en mijn boodschap aan exporteurs is eigenlijk dat er enorm veel informatie en ondersteuning beschikbaar is. Eerste lijns informatie is bovendien vaak gratis. Er is ook financiële ondersteuning beschikbaar. Dus wanneer je over de landsgrenzen heen kijkt, maak er zeker gebruik van. Veel succes. Dank u wel.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. And I think all the speakers have very much met the expectations that we had. In a way, they've even overdone it a little bit. I heard Robert say that China is a minefield and that some of Western enterprises go to China and leave their brains at home. So it all shows that you need a lot of preparation. Johnny also put a lot of emphasis on the cultural differences. And I think the questions also basically go into that area. And I think if we put up these questions at the moment that we're already running over time, the answer has to be, can't be, worded in a very short while. So I would suggest that the questions are put straight into the mailboxes of the different organizers and participants in the webinar. There have been some specific questions also. I see one on the whether the Chinese government can help. It says here WIFE. I suppose it is, the question is not whether the Chinese government can help the WIFE with funding, but a wholly owned foreign enterprise. This is a very technical question. I think you have to go to the SME Center. I'm sure you can get an answer there. Somebody asked for more information that can be found in books, and I think Johnny already gave some hints on what is interesting material to read when you think about going to China. So with this, I think I would like to conclude and basically thank Flanders Investment and Trade, Michelle Surings in particular, for co-organizing the event. I thank our speakers, that is Sarah Landuit from POM Antwerpen, Robert and Johnny from the EU SME Center. Again, look at their respective websites. There are plenty of interesting events being scheduled by POM Antwerpen, by the EU SME Center. I think even for the month of May, we saw 4 or 5 of that on their website. So make sure that you remember also what Robert said, be prepared. Preparation is everything in China. And finally, I think also as for the Belgian Chinese Chamber of Commerce, we look forward to seeing much more of you in the near future. So thank you very much and have success with your approach of the Chinese market. Thank you and bye-bye.